Hi, I'm Rachel Lancaster, and this is the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started, and the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife, about issues that matter, and sharing fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now's our time. My guest today is Michelle Weidenbenner, and she is an author, a speaker, and a podcaster. She's also the proud mother of a recovering addict, and she has made it her mission to help other mothers of addicts. Welcome, Michelle.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here, Rachel. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's really great. And we talked just before I hit record that, this is an important conversation, I think, to be having. And it's not something people talk about, either addiction or being the mother of an addict. So I'm really excited to dig into this with you today. And I'd love to start by getting you to tell us your story and how you came to do what you do.
So for years, my son seemed to struggle with, and I didn't know it was addiction, but he and his wife struggled a lot. And then I just tried to stay in my lane and build myself and what I do. And I began writing and I began publishing books, and I was having a ball. I was, in the second part of my life and just really loving it. But then I realized that our son and daughter-in-law were really sick, and they had two children, two girls. And I didn't realize how I always thought, well, addiction was, maybe drinking too much. And then, you just want to say, just stop that now. But he hurt his back and he got hooked to opioids. And his wife then was hooked on opioids. And so the kids were neglected, and I would often step in and help them out. And I just didn't know what to do. So many times I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know where to go or who to ask. And somebody mentioned like going to an AA meeting, and I went to one of those, and I was like, that didn't help any. Like, I didn't understand how I was supposed to parent, these two adults and not worry about the grandchildren, right? And so I began to do the research, and then I felt called to just write the book, Mom's Letting Go Without Giving Up, 7 Steps to Self-Recovery. Because I thought, oh my goodness, as I started learning, it was like, oh, I needed to know this before. Like, oh my gosh, why didn't somebody tell me this? And why didn't somebody tell me this? And I needed a plan, and oh, if only I had known that. And so then I started to share that in the book, and one thing led to another. I started a Facebook group, a private group where moms could come in, and it was kind of, in conjunction with the book. And I would say, on page such and such, if you're bold enough, come into the group and say, I am going to start my journey, and I'm going to be just a better mom. I'm going to take care of myself and be self-compassionate and all those things. And so it grew and grew and grew, and it's just continuing to grow. And now I want to empower 1 million moms of addicted loved ones into recovery by 2025. And so anytime I can do something like this, just to bring hope, I call myself the chief hope builder of our group, just try to bring hope to other moms by sharing this journey and letting them know they're not alone. I do that. And so my fiction writing has kind of taken a back seat for a little bit, but I still do some of that.
So I know that there is so much stigma around addiction. So how did you come to terms with what was happening in your family and start dealing with it?
The hardest part for me was it wasn't my story to tell. And so like what they were going through, they were ashamed of. And so that made it doubly hard because I needed to talk to somebody about it. But yet, if I did that, then they were going to feel ashamed, right? And so I would get therapists. I would try different counselors just to have somebody I could just go and purge with, and just to spew and talk about it. But honestly, like, I just was lost. I just couldn't find what I needed. So I just started reading and listening to podcasts and just becoming immersed in it's okay to talk about it and know that you're not alone because um, if we're going to change the stigma, we have to be loud about talking about it. And it's a disease. So there should be no shame in that. And so many people are like, well, it's not like when this first, well, after 10 years of this happening, my husband was still saying, it's a choice. It's a choice. And I understand it because so much of it feels like a choice. Like, why are they choosing to do this instead of this? Right. But what happens is initially, they can just want to party and have a good time and get together with friends on the weekend and party some more. But what happens is at some point that brain switches, and then to the brain it becomes this disease where they have to have that substance or the brain makes them think they will die, like it's survival. And so I used to, like, when they detox from heroin, I just thought, okay, just get off of that stuff and go get the shot because there's this shot called Vivitrol that can reduce those cravings and go to all those meetings and just get over it already. Like, I just thought it should happen right away. And just didn't happen like that. It's tough. It's not as easy as moms used to think, but because of the stigma, moms just felt like they couldn't they felt like it was a parenting error. So many moms, they're so filled with guilt. Like, what did I do wrong? What should I have done different? Or maybe sometimes they even struggle with addiction when their children were younger too. And so they feel like they were the reason their children ended up in addiction. So there's a lot of different reasons that the stigma keeps them silent and suffering alone.
And how do you advise moms when they are in that situation, when they are suffering the guilt and the shame? Because I can imagine that that is absolutely paralyzing. I
Mm,
mean, I'm a parent and my son's in his early 20s, but
oof.
and so far he's kind of been all right. He's been good. But
Awesome.
you never know, do you? And then there is that feeling. I can well imagine if that were to happen to me, I would think it's my fault. What have I done wrong?
Yeah.
And it's clearly not intellectually. We can rationalize the fact that it's not our fault, but emotionally,
Right.
we're so involved, aren't we, as parents? So how do you advise women to cope with
Mm.
that and deal with that?
So I I am I say find a group, find your tribe, find a group of moms who understand you. So I have a private Facebook group called Moms Letting Go. And I talk about letting go, but not ever of your child. You let go of that guilt and the shame and the pain and the chaos. And once moms come into this group and they hear other moms like sharing how they feel and how they feel so lost and how they thought it was their fault. And it's just knowing that you're not alone. Misery loves company, there's that. But also to go out and, well, for me, I always wanted to talk to. So when my son finally went into recovery, he would have these treatment counselors. And I'd be like, can I talk to your mom? Because I wanted to talk to the moms about how they were coping with this. And they were always like, there was always this pause, like, my mom? And I'm like, yeah, your mom. But I really think there's comfort in talking to other moms about it, but also talking to recovering addicts. So what you find is when you talk to recovering addicts, they will say, I treated my mom like crap and I hated, when I was in the moment, she wasn't enabling me. So I was mad at her because I wanted her just to give me whatever I wanted. But once she realized that wasn't working and she stopped, enabling me and giving me, making it my life easy, I was mean to her, and I'm sorry for that. So it's kind of therapeutic to hear it from a recovering addict that what moms are doing is right, because when their child is in that disease part of it, um, it's not fun. It's not very loving, and the relationship can really suffer. And there's all those, like, for your son, there's 20 plus years. I mean, you have been there through all the trials and tribulations in his life, and you've spent all these amazing moments with him, and his giftedness, what he's like. But when they start getting hacked with this addiction disease, they become this imposter, this person that you've never seen. And so it's almost like your child's alive, but they're dead too. Like, they're just no longer there. And so I just feel like the antidote to addiction, and this isn't something I feel, this is true, is connectivity. And if moms can connect with other moms or dads, or just people in their communities, online, wherever they can find them, to feel like they're not alone, it's so helpful. It's so therapeutic.
Yeah, I can imagine it's just so isolating, isn't it? And I think it's like any of these issues. I mean, in my community, I talk a lot about menopause, and women go into menopause and they think they're the first person to have ever gone into menopause. And when we start talking about it, it makes it better. And there's an awful big difference between menopause and addiction, but it's that power of talking, isn't it?
Yes, it's a great analogy, because when we're going through menopause, it's something we go through all alone. And all these changes are going on in our body, and we're like, "Oh man, who can I talk to about this?" Because it's a lot of it's really private. I
Mm.
have 5 brothers. I have no sisters, so I don't have any other, like, females in my life to talk to. So, but again, yeah, it's the same analogy. Like, once you start talking to other women and you realize, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. So this is a thing. It's not just me, right? And how did you cope with this and this and this? And you laugh together, and you share, and you try different remedies to the problems or whatever. So it's helpful.
And I know by listening to you speak, you've talked about that crippling fear that
Mm.
you used to feel, that it was so bad that this fear. So can you tell us a little bit about that fear?
Yeah, it's if you've ever dealt with anxiety, like, I had a panic attack one time in my life. And I thought it felt like I was going under a general anesthetic, like, just before surgery, when they say, "Okay, you're gonna take this gas, and you're gonna breathe, and you're gonna go fall asleep. Good night." It was that overwhelming feeling that, "Oh my gosh, my life is out of control, and I can't breathe, and I'm going under." And it's panic. It's like, my child is gonna die, and I can't do anything about it. And for me, a lot of times it was, my grandchildren are going to die, and I can't do anything about it. Because they were living with a neglect, not that their parents, oh my gosh, my son, by the way, my son and daughter-in-law are 2 years and 3 months into recovery now, rebuilt their lives, are reuniting with their daughters slowly. And the trust is really taking time, but we're getting there. But they're so ashamed of how they neglected those girls. Oh my goodness. Like, um but they have to move on, because if they get stuck in that shame, it becomes a cycle where then they try to um numb that pain. So anyway, the feeling, though, is just of panic, fear. And it's something that we talk a lot about in my group, because worry and anxiety in a mom's life stops her from being be like herself, and doing all these amazing things that she other ordinarily would do in the second half of her life. I mean, like, I'm writing a screenplay. Like, there's all these things I want to do, and I'm getting older and older, right? So there's not as much time. So what happens is, when you're stuck there, about being stuck, right?
Mm.
Um, you're frozen. you can't think about doing anything else but getting through the next minute.
So that is what you do other than your support of the mothers of addicts, is you're a writer, is that right?
Yes, yes, I've published 9 books,
Wow.
but, oh, so many more to come. In our tribe, in my membership group, we are writing a book together, and it's gonna be The Unhackable Moms of Addicts, and it's based on Carrie Oberbrunner's book, Unhackable, and it's finding your life through all that and getting back to recapturing your identity and your purpose despite your addicted loved one's disease. And so it's a 30-day, 30-step process. And I'm hoping that there's a lot of stories. So we share this Google Drive document, and all the moms in there, we're taking it 30 days at a time. And today is what is today? The 28th of April. So we're on day 28. We only have 2 more days to go. And moms are sharing stories in there. And so I want it to be this book where moms who are further along in their recovery are mentoring those who are just maybe new to coming into being the mom of an addicted loved one and not knowing like what the heck to do. So I don't know. I'm excited. And in those stories, I'm starting to like think about the screenplay that I want to write. I'm just taking the screenwriting class and I'm really excited. It was always on my list. Like even in high school, I saw things as movies, right? And so now I'm like, well, just go do it then, Michelle. So I'm trying, learning.
But I love that about women. That's a classic example of the women coming together and then being creative and creating something magnificent out of something dreadful. I think that is the power of women, isn't it?
Oh, I love hearing you say it like that. Yes, thank you. I mean, every time I speak it out loud, it becomes a little clearer, right? And when I first had the thought, I thought, oh, I wasn't, you're kind of shy about sharing that. And then, the more I talk about it, the more people in the group, embrace that. And today, one of the moms sent me a whole story about raising one child as an addicted loved one and one that isn't. And what happens to the one who's like that perfect kid, right? So we should be like, oh, yeah, good for you, right? But instead, we're all focusing on that one who has the most problems. And the good kid, if you will, I don't know if there's such a thing as a good kid, but you know what I mean? Somebody who's been successful, who doesn't have this disease, is left behind. And that relationship kind of gets stymied by the attention going to the other one. So there's so many different stories that moms are sharing. It's really powerful.
And I know that faith has been really, really important to you on this whole journey, hasn't it? Can you tell us a bit about what faith means to you and how it has helped?
I think for me, faith just gives me hope. Um, and I think for me, it would be really hard to have hope because it's a dark place. Like sometimes when I get into my meetings and, I've got many moms in the group their children are homeless and just doing so poorly and you just can't breathe. And so faith just helps me think that there's something better in the afterlife, right? Like um, there's got to be a God here. There's got to be something that can help us through this. But also, I'm starting to not believe in coincidences anymore. So when something happens, it's like, oh, it's because I'm faithful and I'm noticing that this is happening. And it's just like this interview with you, I stepped into this place thinking this is a place where I can share and maybe bring others hope by just having faith and using you as somebody who can help me bring the message to more. So I don't know if that helps, but yeah, faith is a strong thing.
Yeah. But I mean, as I said before we hit record, I'm not a woman of faith. Fortunately, I don't have an addicted child.
Yeah.
But if I did,
Yes.
what advice would you have for me as someone who doesn't have that gift of faith, I
Right.
often think,
Yes.
to help?
Sure. That's a great question. I would totally seek out those moms who are in recovery with addicted children and addicted people that are in recovery, and typically those who've been in recovery for a year or two, and go to them and say, "Tell me about your story." Because in hearing the story, it's going to give you hope because millions of people recover every day. But because of the drama of the chaos, it seems like, again, like that prodigal son, it's the drama that gets more of the attention. And so if you just immerse yourself around people who have recovered and listen to their stories, it's just gonna give you hope, and you're gonna think, oh, they did it, so can my child. And so there's a man who just wrote the book, If Not You, Then Who, Jesse Harless. And I just had him come and speak to these moms. And he has a whole different approach to recovery. And a few of our moms have children who are in prison, and it's because of addiction. It's crazy because they try to punish the pain out of them. They're not criminals; they're just diseased with this addiction. But but Jesse sent his book to them, right? Because he was in the throes of these hard drugs, and he came out of that, and he is going into prisons in Georgia. Like, he is just doing all kinds of cool things. And so again, these moms are sending their kids his book saying, read this, you will be inspired and you can do the same.
I find it really interesting that, society has changed so much that from our generation to our children's generation, drugs are so much more acceptable to my son's generation. They are more available, they are
Mhm.
more acceptable. I often have the conversation with my son that, he will say that, well, your drug of choice is alcohol.
Mhm.
And, I wasn't brought up to think of alcohol as a drug, and it is so endemic to British culture. I mean, it's
Oh
just,
yeah.
there is a pub in every village. There's a pub and a church in every single village, in the United Kingdom. And it's massive. We drink when we're sad, we drink to celebrate, we drink when we're happy, we drink to do everything. And I hadn't really thought of it in terms of it being a drug until he said, "Well, your drug of choice is alcohol." But it's a very different kind of world, I think, for our younger people, and that prevalence of drugs for them that, I certainly didn't have as I was growing up. There was a bit of cannabis around, but there was nothing else that I could possibly have got hold of. So how how can moms kind of adapt to that? And also, I suppose if we have concerns about our older children becoming addicted, can we do anything? Do we need to just let go and let them go through it? What can we do?
Well, once they're adults, I mean, they're on their own journey. And I'm sure that you have stories of when you were a teenager and maybe in your 20s of things that you did, you took responsibility for, and you're like, oh, crud, that was not a very good choice, but you learned from it, right? And so sometimes we just have to let our children go through that. And because life is the best teacher, experience and reflected as experience. And what I find is asking the questions to your kids. So, oh, so it looks like you're a little hungover. Was it worth it, to drink that much and then feel so miserable this morning, so it's just kind of being curious, but meeting them where they are and listening without judging them and praying like crazy, or wishing upon a star, like that they just learn really quick, right? Like, don't do that again. But yeah, it's so interesting. The alcohol is the drug of choice, and in our world, it's a DOC, and that means drug of choice. And, marijuana is just, cannabis is becoming legal. It is legal in, a lot of states here in America. But I have had moms with children who were really addicted to marijuana too. But I think it's because in some areas that marijuana is laced more with other stuff. And so you just never really know what it is that you're ingesting, and you're compromising your brain in the meantime. So, yeah, that's interesting that your son said what he said. Like, yeah, mom, that's your drug of choice, and it was the same way in our household. And our son used to see, like on my husband's side, every time they got together, they would drink. It would be a party, and there would be so much laughter. And I know when he was in elementary, he used to think, wow, they look like they're really having fun. And he thought it was funny. And so that's kind of what starts it. So what's interesting is in the States, I don't know about where you live, but these bars are starting to pop up that have no liquor in them. They're for people in recovery, and they serve other types of non-alcoholic drinks. And it's a place to meet. And I don't know what they do there. If they dance, they play cards. I don't know, because I have never been in one of them. But it's a new thing, and I love that they're starting to think about that.
There's a very, very few of those. I know I've heard of some in London, certainly, but it's very, very unusual.
Yeah.
And we are, as a culture, so committed to alcohol.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
yeah, it's scary because I think as I said, a lot of people don't think of it as a drug, but it is. That's
Oh,
what it
yeah.
is.
Yeah, because what if you study what ethanol does to your body, it's no different, or to your brain and how your liver processes it. And I'm not a scientist or a doctor to explain it well, but what I've read is, alcohol turns to ethanol, and then it's how your body processes that is no different than those people that are on heroin, in that it diseases the brain in a similar way. There's so many different studies. I need to verse myself so I can speak articulately about them. But they're all drugs. Yeah, they're all drugs. And it does, because my husband and I, oh my gosh, we have a glass of wine. We will have a drink, vodka and tonic before dinner some nights. But what happens is you really start thinking about it. So now it's my choice, but if my son and daughter-in-law are anywhere near the house, I never drink near them. I just feel like it's rude. So it's just not something I will ever do. So, but yeah, you can get addicted. You can become addicted to, hey, I'm addicted to sweets most days. Ooh. So we all have addictions in some way.
Mm. So you've mentioned already letting go, and I know that that is a key theme of what you do with women, and you want them to be able to achieve that. And I guess that's relevant to all aspects, really, of life for women. It's healthy if we can let go of things. But why do you think that's so important?
So, if we could let go of the shame and the guilt and the chaos in our lives, we can focus. And I call that flow. We can get into flow and create and be a soul on fire to just continue with our life's mission, leaving our legacy, or whatever it is that we love to do, whatever our passion is. But so that's like the motivation to let go, right? And so we work on how to let go. And I have 7 steps in the book, but it's so much easier just to say it than do it, right? And so it's just a lot of different things. It's coming up with a plan. It's allowing ourselves to grow and learn how to let go. It takes practice. It takes a lot of practice.
So what are some of those steps then?
Okay. So in the book, what I do is I take moms through the transformation of a flower. And when you start, you're a seed, and then you germinate, and that is like your self-awareness. So you begin to realize just why, you're aware of how stuck you are. And then then you're breaking out and like, just not quite budding yet, but you're just coming out of the ground, right? And you start changing your inner dialogue because so often it's our inner dialogue that gets us stuck. And we can get stuck on what if the worst happens all the time, even though we don't even know that's going to happen. Step 4 is reaching up for a new leaf on life. So now the leaf is getting a little stronger and taller. It's creating a plan. So how are you going to go about getting your life back again, recapturing you? Step 5 is strengthening. And that's when, okay, you have a plan, but now you have to implement that. And 6 is you're budding. The flower is just budding, and it's progress, reflection, it's having a vision, and then the final step is flowering. And that's where moms in the group will then circle back and become so strong that they then want to go out and help others. And that's where, you're flowering and you're helping others through a similar process. So that's kind of how I just led them through the flowers, through the 7 stages of recovering from being stuck to letting go of the chaos. And once you have a plan, I think, I don't know, it feels like most women I know are planners. And if we can have a plan, we just feel so much more in control, right? So.
That's so funny. I keep trying to tell my husband that, and he doesn't get it. And I thought it was just me. That's so lovely to hear you say, yes, I do think having a plan, it makes everything more manageable, doesn't it?
But see, with addiction, and that's, again, the hardest thing
is no plan, is there?
Right. You have to be able to just accept wherever they are in this moment and know that you can't control it, you can't cure it, and you didn't cause it. And those are the 3 C's. And you just really, kind of absorb that and wear that. And it helps you get through it. But yeah, so having a plan is great for us. But having a plan for our child, yeah, I don't think that's going to work too well. Not when they're adults, because, they got their own agenda.
I suppose we can take back an element of control for ourselves, can't we, by having that plan, which will sort of make us feel a little bit more stable when as you talk about the chaos, how do we cope with the chaos?
Exactly. And so, you control what you can control, and that helps you feel better. And then, I take moms through guided meditations, and, there's a lot of different ways that you can find calm in yourself. It's a lot harder.
So if there was one thing that you wanted moms to know, either about addiction or specifically about looking after their addicted child, what would it be?
Well, maybe 2 things. You're not alone. And this is not a parenting error or a moral failure. You didn't do this. And once moms can embrace and learn what happens to the brain and the body, once they're in the throes of addiction, they can let go of a lot of the guilt and the shame too. So educating yourself, surrounding yourself with other moms who understand your pain. So that was a lot more than one. So I hope that was good. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe or follow, share it, and I'd love a 5-star review. It really helps other listeners find the podcast. You can find out more information about this episode in the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you can access one-to-one mentoring with me, my membership program, and other resources to help make your midlife magnificent. Make the most of your next chapter. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.